Welcome to Florida's Wealthy Divorces, complex cases, expert advice.
Welcome back to Florida's Wealthy Divorces. I'm your host, Stacey Beaulieu-Fawcett, a Florida divorce attorney, helping successful professionals and high net worth families navigate really complicated breakups with as much clarity and sanity as possible. Quick reminder, nothing on this podcast is legal advice, but it is information to help you ask better questions and make better decisions. Today, we're talking about something that sits underneath a lot of high asset divorces, love trauma. If you've ever thought, how did I end up here again? Or why am I so stuck on this relationship when everyone else says just leave? Then this episode is for you. I'm joined by Jianny Adamo, a licensed mental health counselor, trauma-informed relationship expert, and Amazon best-selling author of From Love Trauma to Fearless Love, 7 Tango Steps for Breaking Free from Narcissists and Predators. She's the founder of Fearless Love Counseling and Coaching, and she works every day with people who are recovering from toxic marriages, narcissistic abuse, betrayal, and divorce. So perfect for today's episode. So Jianny, I'm so happy to have you here. For anyone meeting you for the first time, can you give them a quick version of who you are? What is Fearless Love?
Hi, Stacey. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Yes.
Well, Stacey, I started Fearless Love over 12 years ago. I'm licensed almost 20 years, but I started Fearless Love Counseling and Coaching about 12 or 13 years ago after my own divorce. I believed I was in a really wonderful relationship with my best friend, but yet somehow the relationship was not at all cohesive. We were not aligned. We did not want the same things. It was kind of like a codependent, I don't know, I'm assuming you already know these words, the codependent relationship. So I was in a codependent relationship. I was carrying the weight of the whole thing. And then my needs were not really getting met. At the end of the day, I wanted children. He did not. I wanted deeper intimacy, deeper connections, and sexual intimacy was part of that deal for me. And that was not part of the deal for him. So we were not able to come into any kind of agreement. And ultimately I walked away. So that's how the name Fearless Love came about, which I realized walking on the beach here in Delray Beach. I was talking to a friend and I said to her, I think the problem was he never loved me beyond his limits. He never was able to get through his own fears, his own traumas, his own ideas that got in the way of expressing love fully. So therefore, our marriage did not grow. It got stuck. And so this is how my practice came about. So I'm here to support couples, as well as individuals, as well as people who are divorcing, as well as people who are divorced, or even premarital counseling to get you on the right path in alignment, get you into your proper communication skills so that you can resolve your conflicts. So that's why I created Fearless Love. And it's such a passion and a joy for me to be here.
That is awesome. And, people love to hear about other people's stories because it's how we connect with each other, right? We can relate to a story. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that to completely connect with what you're saying. I'm curious though, you didn't just wake up one day and randomly pick love trauma as your niche. So what about your story kind of pulled you into work with, because you deal with a lot of toxic relationships and narcissists and divorce. So where in your story do we get to the point of
move into that? Oh my God, Stacey, great question.
I'm just going right for it.
I know, I'm like, good job. Because what happened to me was I go through my divorce, I leave the state of New Jersey and start my new life in the state of Florida. The same day I got divorced, it was just lined up. It was a very spiritual thing. I think it was a very God-ordained act for me to get divorced because the relationship was not really operating as a marriage. It was operating more as best friends. So I leave the state of New Jersey, come down to the state of Florida. Not long after that, I get involved with all sorts of communities because I wanted to make new friends. I didn't really have friends down here. I didn't know anyone. Only 1 or 2 people, acquaintances, and I didn't have family here. So sooner or later, I got involved with a Christian singles group, and it's not to like target the Christian singles group because they do an amazing job, but that's how myself and this highly narcissistic man connected. And I was still wearing my rosy colored glasses, 17 years with the same man. I married him in my, mid 20s. I had met him in my early 20s. So I had no idea about narcissism. I had no idea about sociopaths or all of this toxic stuff, including like sex addictions. And like, I wasn't like very informed about those things. So anyways, to make a long story short, the first man I got involved in, which this is not just news to me. This happens to so many people. You come out of a long-term relationship, you've got the rosy colored glasses on, and you think everybody's wonderful and hunky-dory. And then even if you don't want to give these people an opportunity, because I actually I did not feel chemistry for this man. I did not like him. He was not my type of any kind.
Wow.
And he knew how to pursue, though. He pursued, and he's an expert in pursuing because he's an expert in grooming and targeting people. And I was a target. I became a target, and he started to groom me. He's a ballroom dancer, and I'm just a natural dancer at that time. I wasn't trained, but I was a natural dancer. And through the dancing, ultimately, he was able to get me to go out with him. And then at that point, he was able to trigger my chemistry because we were dancing and it was like quite close and we were doing all sorts of things. And I was like, whee! And my chemistry goes off. So that allowed me then to get into a relationship with him, which lasted about a year and a half. And in that time frame, I knew that there was something wrong with him and I just didn't know what. And so I kept breaking up. I was really unstable. If you looked at me, you're like, well, why did you break up like so many times? But I kept believing that these were mistakes, that his behaviors were mistakes, that he didn't mean to be abusive, that he didn't mean to be mean, that he didn't mean to just abandon, that he didn't mean all that other toxic behaviors. And why would you say that to yourself? Because on the other hand, they're telling you how much they love you. On the other hand, they're still doing things that make you feel like there is love and that there is care. So there's all these mixed messages coming in. So our brain automatically goes into survival mode with these types of individual. And then when you go into survival mode, you actually go into more bonding, which becomes a love trauma or a trauma bonding. So you end up being deeply traumatized and deeply bonded with individuals that are become very toxic. They're hot and they're cold. They're in and they're out. They're sweet and they're mean. They're noble and then they're disrespectful. And your brain doesn't know what to do with all this. So eventually it just says, they're just making mistakes and we're going to keep at this. They're going to change. It's going to become better, whatever. Or one day we'll just, break up. But unfortunately, when we do break up, what happens to those of us who get stuck in that cycle is we end up quite traumatized because that's not what love is. That's not how love operates. So that's how I ended up with an Amazon bestseller.
Yes.
So I ended up writing my book, From Love Trauma to Fearless Love. 7 Tango Steps for Breaking Free from Narcissists and Predators. I released that in a few years after that relationship. It took me 4 years to get through the trauma. So in those 4 years, I wrote the book. I went through counseling. I read everything that I can possibly find on narcissism and sociopaths and sexual predators and sex addicts, the whole 9 yards. And ends up he's a sex addict who crosses the line into predatory behavior where they're not able really to get like their kicks and their orgasm and all that unless they're doing deviant behaviors. So that was the type of person I was involved with, a predator. And he was highly narcissistic all the way into what we call now the antisocial personality because he's doing things that are illegal and really hurtful and harmful to society.
Right.
But anyway, so that's how I ended up with the book. So I definitely believe in turning lemons into lemonades, and I learned a lot. And now I'm helping a lot of people with this.
Yes, yes. And it's amazing because this is your background in mental health. And to know that someone with these diagnoses of narcissism, etc., is able to manipulate even someone with your training, your background, your knowledge, your experience? You've been doing this for years, and he was able to manipulate you. Is there a better word? Manipulate?
No, that's a perfect word. And that's a great point. I specialize in couples counseling. So therefore I was looking always at what healthy love looks like. I never spent a ton of time looking at those personality disorders and how they are very deceptive and manipulative, because we still from the marriage counseling, we're looking at how to change controlling behaviors, right? Because that's what we're doing, because love is not about control. Yet a lot of us get stuck in marriages where we're trying to control one another. So as a marriage counselor, we're looking at how do we get rid of these behaviors that are controlling and manipulative and move them into the place that is safe, which is based out of freedom. Love is based out of freedom, not out of fear or control. So what happened back then, again, this happened over 15 years ago. So the word narcissism really has only been like such a common household name, so probably like in the last 10 to 12 years, not when I was involved with this man. So yeah, today it's like, what? You didn't know? Of course. We didn't have all that influence with the internet or social media as we did 15 years ago, as we do today. So that's one of the problems that I had faced. And the other thing was hysterical. And it was, even though I did not specialize in them, right? I specialized in love, not in the personality disorders, because that's where they would fall into. I thought it was part of my healing when I read the books, such as the Sociopath Next Door, and there was a few other books that I read where the experts who actually focused on these personality disorders, they claimed to have also still been duped and manipulated, even in their sessions and even in their work with them. So that made me laugh. And that was part of my healing.
Yes.
If they who are experts in these personality disorders still get, duped by these individuals, and who am I? I don't specialize in them. At that time I did not. Now I could certainly pick them out very easily and very quickly. But, back then I did not specialize in this. So quite frankly, I found that to be part of my healing, that I'm like, if they get duped, so who am I not to get duped?
Absolutely.
And I tell my clients that whoever, I'm treating that has these types of issues, they're like, oh my God, why didn't I know? And I'm like, it happened to me. I'm like, it happens to all of it. It happens to the experts. It happens to anyone. I'm like, you really have to be really awakened to those red flags and really be quick to not enter into a relationship with them. But if you're kind and you have a really generous heart, chances are you might get stuck, at least for maybe a few weeks, a few days before you wake up, but you may get stuck for a while longer. So it all depends.
I think it's natural for us to blame ourselves and say, I'm so stupid. I should have caught this. I should have seen this. And I think that you got it right on. Even the experts are missing it and have been missing it. So don't beat yourself up over it. I have a lot of people come to me oftentimes and they'll say, it's almost like they feel bad that they're approaching a divorce, and they'll lay out a series of examples and events, and they'll say things like, I know it sounds silly that I'm even talking about divorce because these are all of the things that he or she does, and I just don't feel like it's enough, but you just don't live my life. You don't understand. How can someone in that type of situation really assess, is this love trauma? Is this, something with like what you've gone through? Or is this just stuff you should be going to couples counseling and working through, a rough patch or something of that nature? How can they distinguish?
Okay, so love trauma, relationship trauma, relational trauma would be considered like a post-traumatic stress disorder that came out of a relationship where either you have been slowly but surely being betrayed over and over again, emotionally, mentally, sexually, financially. So there's all sorts of betrayals going on in your life that you don't see what's going on. And then sooner or later, you're waking up and you're like, what is going on? And then you have the symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress. So You might not be sleeping anymore. Your brain is stuck in obsessive thoughts. You may have pain, headaches, back pain. Like you'll feel it somatically in your body. You'll feel all this tension.
Right.
Some people could be having panic attacks. Some people, like for me, I entered into panic attacks with what happened, how my relationship ended, because I actually got raped in that relationship. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, he was a predator. But anyways, so you're gonna have, if you are dealing with like the effects of trauma effects, then that would be something like, the relationship trauma, the love trauma, which you definitely would want to be in therapy, and you want individual therapy. You
Right.
don't want couples therapy at that point. You need to heal yourself. You need to figure out who you are, because part of the problem in a toxic relationship is that they kind of ebb away at our sense of self and who we are. They get to define us instead of we defining ourselves. We don't need that type of relationship in our lives. So you need to be in individual therapy, not couples therapy at that point. Now, if you think you might be involved with a narcissist who's open to going into couples therapy, then fine. Yes, you can go into couples therapy as long as there's no physical violence. If there's physical violence, it's not recommended. It's not recommended at all to be in a counseling session with your partner if you have physical violence or domestic violence at all. You have to go to individual therapy. Again, so as long as there's no physical violence and your partner, the one you believe has high narcissistic traits, is willing to work with you, then yes, you can definitely go and be treated in a couples therapy sessions.
So, that is, and we said it before, narcissist all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, I guess it's like you said, been over about a decade, is just kind of a household term now, where before no one knew what it meant. And I see it come up a lot in my office. In high net worth divorces, I'll get one or the other. My spouse is a narcissist. Sometimes they'll give me examples of controlling the money, being left in the dark. From your perspective as a trauma-informed therapist, what's the difference between someone who is just maybe self-centered, inconsiderate, and someone who crosses that line into that diagnosis of genuinely narcissistic or emotionally abusive even?
Great question, because we do have a lot of emotionally immature people. And a lot of them happen to fall in the man department. So sorry, guys, but that's just the truth. There's a lot of immature masculine men out there, which can seem that they are highly narcissistic because they don't truly affirm or understand the emotional realm. That one piece isn't enough to be labeled a narcissist. That's not enough. When you get a diagnosis of, being a narcissist or antisocial personality disorder or borderline, because a lot of the like toxic women have the borderline personality disorder.
Right.
So it's, that's on their end. So what happens with these, let's say, high abusive individuals, because that's what happens. They're highly abusive in their relationships. You need to have a cluster of events and things happening. So not just one thing, which is the emotionally immature, because all of them are emotionally immature, but that's not enough to give you a diagnosis. So the other pieces you might want to look at is emotionally immaturity, right? So therefore they don't understand the emotional realm and they don't know how to validate. They seem to always be disregarding the emotional realm. Then there's a high control. They must have control. They must have attention. That's another thing. They love attention. That's whether it's positive attention or negative. It's all good for them. They love drama. They're addicted to their dramas. Okay. They play victim. Oh my goodness gracious. Every story that comes out of their mouth, somebody did something to them, and you absolutely as their partner are always doing something to them. So everything gets turned around and spun around. That would be a shift blaming. Anytime you try to hold them accountable to anything, there's a shift blaming going on, and they will accuse you of being controlling. They will accuse you of manipulating, but yet it's a projection of who they are onto their partner. So there's a few more things, but those primarily are some of their main issues, from the manipulation, from the control, the shift blaming, the gaslighting. I forgot about gaslighting. Gaslighting would be pretty much they can just start creating BS. And you call them on it and they're like, oh no, you even have, like, let's say they say the phone bill and you're like, you've called, this woman or you called this man, and here are the facts. They'll still create stories to defy the facts. So that would be a form of gaslighting, just completely define your truth and the facts.
Right. Even in the face of the truth being shown to them. And we do see so much in our cases. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That they will just bold-faced lie and continue to lie. This has been so good. Let me quickly recap because we're out of time. We're going to go to a second episode. So whoever is binge watching can follow right along. There's so much to cover and we never have enough time. But let me quickly recap for the person who's listening while trying not to cry in the car. Love trauma is real. It's not just a dramatic phrase. Wealth, status, lifestyle does not protect you from toxic patterns. And staying wasn't stupidity. It is often out of loyalty, hope, and trauma bonding. So if you want to stick around and listen to our next episode, we're going to shift gears and talk what healing looks like. And then Jianny, you'll hang out with me for part 2? Perfect. So for those of you listening, if you're seeing yourself in this conversation, take a breath. You're not crazy, you're not weak, and you're definitely not alone. We'll be back with part 2, more on healing, rebuilding, and creating fearless love after divorce with Jianny Adam.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.